Come back. I've something very important to tell you, demanded the caterpillar. Keep your temper, said the caterpillar. Is that all?
Hey everyone, just a reminder that this video is part 2 of 3 covering the 1988 Czechoslovakian version of Alice in Wonderland. The first video went up last week, and the final video will be up next week. Thanks for watching. When the elevator is nearing the bottom, then the floor gives way, and she falls through and ends up in a pile of leaves, and then the hole seals itself.
They didn't spare themselves on the leaves. This was a big pile of leaves. She gets off of the pile and the rabbit appears. She's still trying to follow this rabbit. I don't know. She keeps saying, "Please, sir, what do you want from this rabbit?" I don't know. The leaves start to disappear. There is yet another one of those little desks. The drawer opens and it sucks up presumably the rabbit and all of the leaves. So it was an interesting effect.
Once the leaves have all been sucked into the drawer, Alice notices a door with another tiny door.
This is basically their answer to the Hall of Doors with the little table.
So inside this drawer that the leaves have been sucked into is a tiny key which opens the tiny door. And through the tiny door, Alice sees canvases with garden scenes painted on them. But the rabbit is walking through all these paintings. And Alice, of course, wants to follow this rabbit for some reason, but she can't get through the door. And then inside this drawer, she then finds a bottle of ink.
This was weird.
And she tastes the ink, and apparently it tastes good, so she drinks the whole bottle.
I feel like maybe they were touching on children's desire to taste strange things. Ooh, what's this be like? Sawdust, ink. Not a good idea. Do not try this at home. But on the movie, it happened, and she was fine.
But instead of shrinking, she turns into a little doll. And the doll is stop motion.
The doll was also in her room at the beginning.
Yes. And you might think with an old-fashioned doll of this type that it would be really creepy, but it really wasn't. It was just a normal-looking little doll, and they animated her very well, so she looked very lifelike when she's walking around as this little doll.
The doll basically looked like her with her hair and the same type of, the same dress. And I would have thought, too, when he was first telling me about it, that it might be creepy. It wasn't. There was a take on it a little bit later in the movie that was kind of creepy, but not this miniature version. If you have a major doll phobia, then it might not be good for you.
As you would expect, she can't get back through the door because it's now locked again. And she, as the doll, finds a little cookie, or as you find out later, a tart. And she eats this cookie tart and grows huge and bumps her head on the ceiling, another little bump. And she starts crying, and I really liked the crying effect because she has her hands over her eyes, and she's obviously hiding some sort of little device that is pouring down water from behind her hands. And it worked really well. I thought it was really simple and a really good effect. And
she was very wet.
Yes. Eventually she's swimming around in her own tears. She doesn't shrink again at this point, but she ends up in the pool of tears anyway. In this ocean of tears, she meets the mouse again, like in most versions, except this mouse seems to mistake her head for an island because he comes aboard her head and decides to build a fire, including pounding little sticks into her head. And she doesn't seem fazed by this. It's only when he lights this fire to cook some food that she says that that's taking it a bit too far, and she dumps him into the water.
He was dressed like a little gentleman pirate or something. They really went out on his costume. The water rat is never fancy.
And he was probably the cutest little taxidermy in this version because all the other taxidermies were kind of weird and creepy.
He was just trying to cook a meal on her head, but some people just won't understand.
As she's swimming around in the pool of tears, the rabbit appears in a rowboat, and she sort of shoves him away from her.
Oh, the Queen will be furious. Watch out, sir! Wait for me, sir!
And he ends up going through this painting of an ocean. Eventually, she eats another cookie and shrinks again, and then she's surrounded by all of the different displays that were in the elevator. There are birds flapping near her, there's little bits of furniture, there's little skulls and skeletons from the museum displays.
The water looked really dingy.
That was something that Sarah really was noticing more than I was noticing. Since she's small enough, she now can use the key to get through the door, and when she gets through, all the water flows out after her, and she finds the rabbit. He sees the doll version of her, mistakes her for Marianne, and orders her to go back and get him the scissors. So she goes back through the whole of the painting that he came through, and finds herself in another room that looks very similar to the one she just left, except this one has a huge castle house made out of little wooden blocks. She climbs the ladder to get up into the house, and the inside of this block house is all rabbit hutches.
To begin with.
Yeah, which I thought was an interesting little choice. At the end of the row of rabbit hutches, she finds another room, and in this room is all the rabbit's little furniture, including another table full of scissors and some more ink. She drinks the ink and is now huge inside this rabbit's house. So the rabbit has followed her. I don't know why he couldn't go get his scissors himself if he was going to just follow her anyway.
He comes along and she hears him coming, and for some reason now she doesn't want to be discovered, so she barricades the door. He tries to charge the door. His little paw ends up caught in the door, and she's pushing the door against it, and he's crying out. His paw gets hurt, so he
gets a little rip that he has to sew it up.
He sews himself up. That's another thing. Right outside of this room is a very dingy looking
medicine cabinet
with a red cross on it. He sews himself up, and he decides that if he can't get in that way, he'll come through the window.
He tries a bunch of different things that are similar to what's in the book, except with weird, darker twists to them. Like he has a little saw that maybe he's going to cut off her arm, I don't know.
He was trying to cut off her arm, and she just goes, "Ow!" and pulls her arm away, which, that was...
He ends up falling backwards into his glass case of vegetables.
Into the cold frame, and then she also threw the little toy blocks off of the house down at him and into the cold frame or frames.
Eventually this does not work. He can't get her out. She's not budging, so the rabbit pulls a little whistle, I think out of his chest, and blows it, and through the door comes a horse-drawn carriage of little taxidermy animals, except it's not horses, it's chickens with skulls instead of heads, and they make horse noises when they're running, and whinny.
Yes, and they're wearing little crimson elf hats.
Yes,
because
they look
why
like
not?
Santa hats or jester hats or something, I don't know.
Tim Burton, eat your heart out. This is shortly followed by other taxidermy animals with bare skeleton heads, googly eyes, and little jingle bell hats.
Yeah, the whole carriage is full of weirdness. It's so strange. It's one of those things where you just have to see it to fully grasp the weirdness.
They do want Bill to go through the chimney,
Bill is a little lizard, but he has a skeleton tail and a skeleton head.
and he gets kicked out of the chimney. Alice has rocks thrown at her by the rabbit that turn into those little tarts. Then she eats part of one, shrinks down, leaves the house, and as she's coming out, the rabbit is tenderly funneling sawdust down into Bill.
Bill had exploded, sort of, and the rabbit had to fix him.
Yes. How nice of him. Well, now they're mad at her for that, so they are after her. And other strange creatures come to life, including a crib with wings and bird legs.
Yeah, I don't know. There was so many weird things at this point, just attacking her for I don't know what reason.
Probably for hurting Bill.
Probably.
There's too much to describe with this film. Really, there is. She is eventually captured.
Well,
Okay. She falls.
all of these taxidermied animals are swarming around her, and she falls into, I don't even know what it is. It's like milk or glue or
Probably
something.
glue, because she comes out as a regular-sized version of herself, but she's coated
It's like she's in a
pa-
cocoon of herself.
a papier-mâché version of herself with eye holes. So she's looking around, and she gets dragged off by the chicken horses. The rabbit locks her in this room.
A pantry, I believe.
Yes, and she manages to get herself out of this. Like
She hatches.
she's like a piñata. She gets herself out of this little piñata version of herself and starts taking in all of these strange things around her in this pantry.
Yes, this pantry is full of so many weird things. There's a carton of eggs that is hatching little tiny skulls that scurry away. There's a can that she opens and there's cockroaches in it.
There's bread that sprouts snails.
And a living roast that sort of crawls away like an inchworm.
A living piece of raw meat that's scurrying away.
Yeah. Eventually she finds the key in a tin of sardines and escapes.
After tasting this liquid, why? Then comes a "oh no you didn't" moment for me. Okay, maybe most people would not be disturbed by this. I don't know. I haven't taken a vote.
It didn't bother me as much as it bothered you.
She's going down the hall and she passes by the mouse in his little velvet hat and suit, dead in a mousetrap. Once again, not a version for children. I felt bad. He's not supposed to be a bad character or a dead character. They just had to include a little reality and throw in a velvet suit while they were at it. What on earth? Okay, rant over. It was so wrong. I mean, I know what happens in real life, but come on.
After passing by the little mouse, she finds another room, and this room has a bunch of shoes outside of it, so she takes off her own shoes to enter.
She's a very polite little girl.
And inside is another table, and the floor is full of holes, like wormholes, except they are socks. They are living socks, acting like worms, burrowing through the floor of this room.
And she doesn't leave immediately.
It's such a strange addition to this movie, but I kind of loved how creative it was, because who thinks of turning socks into worms that burrow through wooden floors?
Maybe they stuck their hand in a sock and went like this, like, oh yeah, this is like a worm. Wait.
I don't know, but I don't know. It was so weird. but it was probably one of my favorite parts because of the level of creativity that went into it.
And if you can guess what this scene emulates, you deserve a Klondike bar. This is the caterpillar scene.
Yes.
She makes her way to the desk. She gets into the drawer, and this is a sock that needs to be mended, so he has enough holes to do this. He gives himself dentures and glass eyes, and he gets up onto this little wooden mushroom, which also is in her room at the beginning.
And he basically gives most of the caterpillar's correct lines from the book. Like, this was one of the closest scenes to the book, I think, because of how many lines taken directly from the book.
The closest scenes.
Yes.
But she actually takes pieces of wood off of either side of the mushroom and does eat off of them later.
First, she leaves when the caterpillar is going to take a nap, and he sews his eyes shut.
He's sewing his eyes shut, like it's being darned, so it's like he's going to sleep. His eye is closing. Her socks try to escape before she leaves to join the other ones, but she manages to get them back.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching our video this week. Just to remind you, the last part of this 3-part review will be up next week. Thanks for watching.